How do you transfer your energy? Let's call it sex transmutation. How do you transfer your sex transmutation of your energy into creativity? Hi, my name is Ann McNeil, and I'm very excited today. Well, I'm excited every day, actually, but I'm excited today, especially because we're tapping into the Think and Grow Rich Mastermind philosophy espoused by Napoleon Hill, discussing the mystery of sex transmutation, which he calls the 10th step to riches. And so I want to start off by asking you, how do you transmute your energy? Call it whatever you want to call it, but for today, let's consider it sex energy. How do you transfer that or transmute that energy into something that's creative for you, or a desire or purpose or passion? How do you do that? How do you change this energy, transfer it from one element or form into another? Well, for many of us, it is through journaling, exercise, walking. It can be so many, many different things. We talk about the eye contact. We talk about the adornment of the clothes. We talk about the handshake. But there's so many different ways to transfer that energy. But why is that important? And that's what we want you to think about today for yourself. Why is it important to learn, regardless of what age you are? Why is it very important to learn how to transfer or transmute that energy from one form to another? Well, I say all the time, I could actually do this podcast by myself, but not today. No, not today. We have a phenomenal guest. We're going to introduce him shortly. But we also have, equally as phenomenal, our co-host. And our first co-host I'd like to introduce to all of you and reintroduce to others is none other than, yes, Luis Jimenez. Good morning, Luis. How are you?
Good morning, Miss Ann. I'm fantastic. I'm ready. One of my favorite principles, the six transmutation of energy. And you started with something really, really good, which is how do we, right? Why? Why? Because this book, this amazing book, my favorite book in the world, tells us that the energy is right there. We just need to use it on our behalf, right? So we can create. We are creators. That's what it is. We need that energy to create. And that's the best part. We can create it. We can create things. It's amazing. Dreams, right? All these things, our computers, our phones, everything that we use to make our lives so much easier, it started in the mind of somebody. And that person had the ability to change that thought into action, into an idea. So yes, today is going to be fantastic. Thank you. So happy to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Every Saturday, this co-host always asks the question when we're prepping for the show. He says, "Okay, where in the world is Ann McNeil today?" And so today I'm in Kissimmee, Florida, just finishing a retreat with Move to Millions with Darnia Jarvin. And so let me introduce our other co-host, none other than the phenomenal, I have to find some better adjectives to describe you, Galen. Let me see. How about the Think and Grow Rich Mastermind co-host coming off mute? Good morning, Galen Bingham. How are you this morning?
I thought you were going to go straight to handsome, dapper, but hey, I'll go with those. I'll go with those too.
But guess what? I didn't have to, because you are going to do a very good job of doing that yourself. So
Well, hey, I am so looking forward to this conversation. This is one of those topics. This is a chapter that really takes us out of our intellectual minds, and it really starts to encourage us to think about the spiritual element of of how we transmute, how we change from one form to the other. And I love the way the author puts it. And so I'm just going to read a little bit from the book. It says, sex desire is the most powerful of human desires. When driven by this desire, men develop keenness of imagination, courage, willpower, persistence, and the creative ability unknown to them at other times. So there is something about when we try to express our sex drive that taps into energies that we don't normally tap into. Well, this chapter is about how do you use those same energies when it comes to trying to create something else. How do you transmute that same desire into the desire for riches, however you might define riches, whether it's wealth, money, but whether it's creativity, whether it's the desire for something else. How do you transmute that? So I can't wait to get in this conversation. Can't wait to talk to our guest because he's got a very, very fascinating background as well.
Well said, Galen Bingham. Well said. So let's introduce our guests. Come on, Mike Phillips, to the front of the show. Our special guest this morning is none other than Mike Phillips, and he is huh, and listen,
Oh, I
Mike,
lost my.
listen. I'm going to read a little of your bio, but I think that
I
it's
lost my headphones.
oh, it's okay. It's okay. It's right. All right. I want to just go ahead and read a little of your bio. Mike is a digital marketer. He is an automotive digital marketer, to be exact. He has his own podcast, which I was blessed to be a part of his um, Leadership Toolkit podcast. And he's a consultant, a coach based in Colorado Springs. He's renowned for his contributions to leadership education, sales training, and motivational speaking. He hosts the definitive podcast for leadership education, the Leadership Toolkit. Mike has over 30 years in leadership and coaching combined with 2 decades in sales and marketing. So, welcome to the podcast and the Think and Grow Rich Mastermind Live show, Mike. Can you share with our listeners just a little bit more about who you are and how did you get here? And what I mean by here, in this space where I know a little bit about your background because I was on
Mhm.
your show, but I think that it is so interesting. We'd like to have you share. At any point you want to start, all right?
Sure. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me on, first of all. And sorry, I lost my headphones. I kicked them out of my ears. I don't know how that happens with a little cord here. So, um, how do we get here? So I'll give you making a long story, hopefully not too long. When I started, I was raised by a single mom, had two jobs. She had two jobs, and so that was sort of the hand me down of for all of us as I was growing up. Everybody has a couple of jobs, and that's how you identified was how many jobs did you have, and that gives you the win, right? Because everybody's chasing money early on, and so. Born in Southern California, moved to Colorado early. Like I said, divorced parents, have one sister. Got involved in business and started out DJing at a roller rink. That's how I got into the podcasting world, was because I started DJing at this roller rink, and I thought, I think I told Ann this when she was on my show. I envisioned I was going to be the next Casey Kasem. So I went into broadcasting for college. Did not complete broadcasting for college because when it came to TV, I was like, I am never going to do TV. I'm the voice. I don't need to be in front of a camera. I got a voice for, or a face for radio, as they say. And so, who knew about YouTube years later and video podcasting? I probably should have stayed in video production, but got involved in broadcast. Ended up being a partner in the roller skating rink. Went through a whole bunch of stumbling blocks, hit walls in business, and in 2004 found myself a single dad myself, divorced, on tough times financially, on tough times mentally, emotionally, all the, all of the things where we so often will hear people say, oh, well, you just pull yourself up by the bootstraps and go. That's really hard when you're in a place that you don't have bootstraps, right? You're broke, you're broken. And so in 2000, and that was 2004 timeframe. And the crazy thing was, at that point in my life and in my career, I hadn't even been, everything was sort of by default, right? You get up, you go to work, you work a couple of jobs, you have kids, you chase the American dream. And then when all that shatters, you're like, well, what am I even chasing? What am I doing now? And it was a difficult time. And what was crazy is I just started dating a gal, who's now my wife. We've been married for almost 20 years. And it's it is crazy because when I first heard when we first set up for me to come on the show, and this was the subject, the mystery of sex transmutation, I was like, oh Lordy, right? Because I've never, like, for me personally, I've never cared for like that title, because the moment you say it to someone, they're like, what that, you get some looks, right? And when you're in coaching, in sales, and going through this, um, but the crazy thing, going back in time when I met who's now my wife, I think one of the pieces, the heart of this chapter and what we'll be discussing is, it is so important to find the right person and the right spouse, because you will do all kinds of crazy stuff to impress them, impress upon yourself, build, rebuild, all the things, and it becomes greater than you as the individual. So starting in 2004, I got into automotive sales. I'm a firm believer that almost no one goes into used car sales deliberately. You fall into it, and because but that was the start of a really powerful mindset journey for me. The first coach that I had was a guy that trained me into sales, and he I remember going through his class, and he did many of the activities in this book without me knowing it. He's like, you need to write down your goals, you need to be specific, you need to write what you're going to be a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. Well, keep in mind, I'm completely a hot mess. And so I'm writing this stuff down in my wallet on a little card, little business card type of deal. And I said, okay. And I had things like, I wanted to get back to owning a home. I wanted to buy my first dog. I wanted to buy my now wife, then girlfriend, a Great Dane, because she had always wanted a Great Dane. I had a specific number in mind. I wanted to get into making six figures. I was like, I'm going to make $100,000 this year. Because he was like, you got to be specific now. And that was so far out of reach at the time. I'm like, okay, whatever, dude, I'll write it down. I'll stick it on my mirror and do these things. But it was more an activity to satisfy the activity and the coach, not because I really believed it in the moment. And so the crazy thing is, by 2005, I bought a new car, I bought a house, we bought the Great Dane. We actually did it backwards. It was 2005 into 2006. 2005, we had a one bedroom apartment, had a Great Dane, and then got the house later and so forth. But all these things came to fruition. And I think 2005, 2006 timeframe was about when this book was recommended to me. And I remember connecting with somebody at a Tony Robbins Firewalk conference. If I don't know if anyone there has attended one of his firewalks, but it is completely mindset, mind over matter. Here's what we do. And someone says, oh, hey, have you ever read this Think and Grow Rich? And it's like, I'd heard of it. I said, no, I've never read it. Like but I was young and a little bit probably egotistical, and I'm like, I've heard of it. I know the principles. Like they wrote it down on the first page, whatever. And keep in mind, in car sales, right? Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Henry Ford, right? And so that was when I was first introduced to Think and Grow Rich and the book, and started reading it. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I had sort of been being trained into this by a mentor of mine without really knowing it. Fast forward, moved from sales, did finance, did everything within an automotive dealership, started a podcast in 2009 to 2011, was a top sales podcast. Ann and I were talking about this. I started on a platform called Blog Talk Radio. and way back in the day, you had call in, but I got up to about probably 1,500 to maybe 2,000 listeners a week at that time. So in my mind, I was the Casey Kasem of online radio. That was the measuring stick, right? And then fast forward, took time off of that to really get more into reconnecting with my wife, raising a family. But like I said, long story, not as long. Been in automotive sales in some form or fashion. Now digital marketing there specifically, with a dealership, and doing some consulting work with some others for 21 years now total. And been running this podcast. Been married for almost 20. Have three wonderful, successful children. Like, we're always proud of our kids, and that's one of that for me. That's the measuring stick. Also, is like, okay, what are they doing? Did they maybe listen to mom and dad? Did they maybe take something away? And so that, in short, is how we get here. And the crazy thing is, I said to Ann, I don't remember if she was invited on my show or I was invited on her show some months ago. Some emails crossed, and it was like, yeah, let's get together. I don't think either of us realized we were going to appear on each other's podcasts in succession within a couple weeks. And so it's like, here we are. So that's it in a nutshell. Been in Colorado Springs, living the dream, have accomplished a lot of goals. And Ann was kind enough to sit with me after my podcast and gently throat punch me and say, hey, maybe what you need to do is go reread a few of these pages. Because I was straightforward with her. I said, gosh, I haven't actually picked that book up and really read through it in several years. And she's like, oh man, you should. She goes, you got it. Here's what you need to do. Look up this and this. And she's like, let's get back to it then. Because anytime I think you hit a wall, there's so much wisdom. And there's two or three books that I have: Think and Grow Rich, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and first and foremost for me is the Bible. So you take those three books on leadership and growth, and it's you can
All the
build
way,
anything, do anything.
all the way to the top. I see Galen leaning in. So Galen, I'm not sure if you have a question or a comment. Thank you, Mike.
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
you first of all, there are just so many things I can connect with in your background. I'm curious, and you kind of talked about this a little bit. When did this book become more than just a book? When did this elevate to the point where it's one of your top three most referenced book of principles? Because, like I read this book, I don't know, when I was in high school, because it was a book
Mhm.
that everyone said that you're supposed to read if you're going to consider yourself to be educated. This is one of the books you got to read. You have to read. So I read it, and if you ask me a question, I could share a couple things to convince you that I've read it, but I didn't really study it until much, much later. When did this become more than just a book for you?
I would say the first time I read it was 2006, and it was right after the Tony Robbins conference. And I think at that time it started to be more than just a book, simply because, like I said, I'd had a mentor getting into automotive in 2004 that had pitched all these principles, uh, obviously not by accident, but he also didn't line it out of, oh, well, hey, you need to do this and this and this. I would say probably 2008 for me. It became more than just a book. And the reason I say 2008, that was probably the second time I'd read it cover to cover, rather than sort of a reference guide. And I remember the reason it was so important during that time for anyone, call it a recession, call it an economic downturn. People wanted to label things so it was softer. But in 2008, societally, it was rough, you know. In the auto industry, we were doing it was called cash for clunkers. I don't know if anyone remembers that. You dragged your car in, and as a car dealer, we had to literally take and the person would get these big federal refunds and so forth, and they were trying to stimulate the economy to get people back to buying things and buying cars. So you'd bring in your crummy old car, and then you would that we would literally have to pour stuff in the engine to destroy the car. We had to show the car was destroyed for the person to get their money. And I remember I was reading it back then cover to cover, and we realized like the mindset of doing things differently. What do you want to focus on? And it was one thing for us as a dealer, and I was in management at that time. But one of the things that came up was, okay, well, we're doing all this stuff, but again, we were just sort of doing it by default. And it was like, well, what could we possibly do to promote and grow this? And so we turned it into this sort of game show of, okay, we're going to drag in this crummy car, we're going to record it on camera of us destroying it and so forth. And it was really taking going through and reimagining, if you will. I think that's about where I was at, was like the power of imagination and so forth, of what we could do with it rather than just, oh, hey, we're conducting day-to-day business. And I remember reading through it at that time. And while there were a lot of people going through difficulties, our store, our automotive dealership, and myself individually, we were experiencing massive growth during this recession. And I think it was had a lot to do with, where mentally I was, and like I said, that was where I really started to view it as one of the top three books, and probably more of a reference manual, that it was like, okay, you can go back to it. So that's why immediately when Anne said to me a few weeks ago, she goes, you need to go read this and you need to go read this. She says, just talking to you, no offense or anything. Not that she's afraid to speak her mind. She's like, hey, you might want to go do this, just a suggestion. And I'm like, oh, that's probably a pretty good idea, right? And so it's I would say 2008 is the short answer to your question. Sorry to go on for so long.
No, no,
I
perfect. I
got no
mean,
shortage of the words, man.
yeah, I think we all kind of go on this journey of kind of reading it to read it, and then really seeing that there's something there. So thank you for
Yeah.
taking us on that journey. Luis, what's on your mind? I see you kind of nodding your head.
Galen. Excuse me, Galen. Galen.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to, before Luis goes, I just want to just insert something that I think is timely from Mike's story and his journey that Napoleon Hill tells us. And it just popped out for me when you used the word, you said the power of reimagining and
Hmm.
that creative imagination. Because what Napoleon Hill tells us, and this goes exactly to the point of the principle today about sex transmutation, and we don't think about it in that terms, but it's really the transference, if you will, or transmutation of one form of energy into another. And he tells us that there are no other known sources from which inspired ideas or hunches may be received. And he goes on to talk about how the creative imagination is best used when it's vibrating. And when you think about the vibration of thought, when y'all were getting together and thinking of what can we do differently, we got to
Hmm.
destroy this power. Oh, wait a minute, why don't we record it? And I just want to stop there just for a moment, because I think so very often we're all in situations where we don't think about thinking about what can we do. Can I say
Hmm.
that again? And then we're going to go to Lewis. And this is for everybody who's listening. Stop and think. This is the transference of the energy. You call it sex transmutation, you call it creativity, you can call it imagination, whatever you want to call it. Practice thinking about thinking to act on your inspired ideas and your hunches. That is the power of this energy and transference. So I just want to share that. And now, Galen, we can go to Lewis. Thank you.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Galen. Thank you, Mike. That was wonderful. No,
Yep.
tapping into what you just said, Anne, says you're talking about stimulation, you're talking about vibration, right? And we need to understand that the sex desire is one of the most, if not the most powerful emotion that a human being can have. So, and what this chapter explains us, this principle is how can we use that energy, that desire, that emotion that is very strong to the point that people kill and don't care. They go to jail because of this emotion, right? That they can control. And that's the good thing on understanding, like I know how capable I am of things, especially when we're young, right? On our teens and all these hormones, and we have a zero, almost zero control on these desires, and right, it's also so new for us. So, Mike, I want to bring you towards what Anne was saying. Like, how do you are capable, or how do you, if you can understand, right? We're studying ourselves. How can you realize and change that change of attitude, change of energy levels, where I am, I don't know, I don't feel like doing something, but I'm going to do it. How do you transmute that energy that comes from a source towards something productive? Or if you remember a big example of it.
I that's a good question. And I think first and foremost, again, thinking back to these points in my life, I didn't know the answer to it at first. It was simply when you're talking about transmuting the energy, and like I said, when I was coming on the show, I'm like, oh man, this because of the title of the conversation, people start to see that as sort of uh, ooh, how are we going to address that? For me, I think at the core, it boiled down to, and again, prior to knowing what I was doing, people always said, "Oh, hey, you're so good in sales, and you would be so good in marketing and so forth." I think that's one of those things. There are certain people that have a charisma about them, and they act on these parts of what is talked about in this chapter, like Ann was saying early on: eye contact, handshakes, human touch, those sorts of things. For me, it was more just raw and not thought out. If I'm honest, it was that I was trying to impress my first girlfriend and now wife, that you know and it talks about in this chapter, there are many great leaders, many successful inventors, people that are genius level. It's not always about them that's in the forefront. It is about, did you pick the right spouse? Because for me, and again, this may not be the most tactful way to say it, but like, my wife likes nice things, and I am driven by that because I do want to see that some level of success. I want to be able to provide for her. I want to be able to provide for my family. And so one of the things I realized reading through this, that sexual energy by nature, and is, that is something that I probably had and just didn't tap into at an early age, because emotionally, like, I'm a very extroverted person. I'm very into, hey, yeah, let's sit down and talk, and let's, have a real face-to-face conversation. Like they say, the windows are the eyes to, or the eyes are the windows to the soul, right? And so when you look into somebody's eyes, that right there, for some people, that becomes a sexual cue, and for others it just becomes a point of connection. And so as you're sitting there having, and I'm just talking about one piece of that body language, you sit and you have that deep conversation, on some level, at a very raw level, that's a sexual energy. And again, for me, I was just doing it because that's part of who I am, and I thought it was the right thing. I wasn't able to label it until later. And part of the driving nature behind that was really because of the woman that was, I don't want to say behind me, beside me, either dragging me along at points, pushing me along at points, and that was definitely the core of hopefully that answers your question,
No, no,
Luis.
it does, and it's true because for most of us men, this masculine power, this masculine polarity, right? This, which we all have, feminine feminine and masculine
Uh-huh.
polarities. It is like integrated. You don't even think about it, right? We want to provide because we want to make the other person feel good. Because at the end, we understand, if we're in good terms, and if I'm providing, it's going to lead to what? Sex, right?
Right.
It's true.
Well,
That's
and
the
the
raw part.
reality, and not to get too far past, because I know you have to, you have a video to introduce and so forth, but
Yes.
but it's biblical. right? I mean, for me, and that's one of those things we can go there as we continue the discussion, that it starts at a biblical place.
Yes, of course. Absolutely. It is human nature as well,
Absolutely.
right? It is part of it. So, yes. So, I am going to introduce you. This is my favorite part of the whole weekend because it gives me a reminder of every single principle. So, you guys keep your pen or pencil out, your paper out, because even if you've heard this video dozens of times, hundreds of times, it is going to tell you something new today. Here we go.
Number 1 is desire. Napoleon Hill said that everything starts with a burning desire, a compelling reason for doing what it is we do. Step 2 is faith, having belief in our ability to attain that which we desire. Step 3 is what we call autosuggestion. Autosuggestion simply means being very intentional about the things that we are pouring into our thoughts, into our brains, and into our consciousness. Our brains, our minds will receive everything automatically, but we have to work extra hard to make sure that the positive things are what we are feeding ourselves, because those positive thoughts are going to turn into positive actions. Step number 4 is specialized knowledge. No one person knows everything, even about whatever their particular area of expertise might be. And the value of the mastermind principle is using the specialized knowledge of other people. Step number 5 is imagination, the workshop of the mind. Everything starts with our imagination and our thoughts, the burning desire to transform those thoughts into our reality. In order to do that, we have to take a look at step 6, which is organized planning. That is how we crystallize our desire into action, organizing ourselves. Having the thought and not acting on the thought isn't going to get us anywhere. We have the thought, we go through the organized planning to transform that thought into action. Step number 7 is decision. What Napoleon Hill said is the mastery of procrastination. Napoleon Hill said that the antidote to procrastination is simply to make a decision and then move on that decision. Step 8 is persistence. We have to have a sustained effort which is induced by our faith in order to achieve our goals. One of Napoleon Hill's books I love, even the title, 3 Feet from Gold. Those people who became rich during the gold rush in the Wild Wild West days didn't do that because they were necessarily smarter or had better information than anyone else. It's because they stayed just a little bit longer. Sometimes people left when they were just literally 3 feet from gold. So hanging in there, being persistent, is step number 8. Step number 9, the power of the mastermind, the driving force. None of us can accomplish anything on our own. Everybody, I don't care who you are, from the most prominent person to the person who might be considered the lowest on the totem pole, everybody has someone who helped them get to where they are. And the power of the mastermind is being able to use those influences around us, use the thoughts, use the knowledge, use the exploration of other people to help us in achieving our goal. Step number 10, the mystery of sex transmutation. This title can be a little confusing, but essentially what the mystery of sex transmutation means is that we oftentimes in our society think of sex as being purely physical. It is absolutely physical, but what Napoleon Hill teaches us is that sex also has an emotional element, and that sex is the strongest of our desires. That if we can take our sexual energy, transform that into positive, creative influences, it can propel us to new heights. And so we spend quite a bit of time talking about the mystery of step 10, which is sex transmutation. Step number 11 is the subconscious mind, which Napoleon Hill tells us is the connecting leap between our human mind and the infinite intelligence, the source of all thought, the source of all creativity. Conscious mind, we spent some time talking about how we use that through the influence of autosuggestion and what we're feeding into our mind. Step number 12, which is the brain, the broadcasting and receiving station of thought. Final step number 13, the sixth sense, the door to the temple of wisdom. This is the final step through which infinite intelligence may and will communicate voluntarily without any effort from or demands by the individual. The principle is the apex of the philosophy. It can be assimilated, understood, and applied only by first mastering the other 12 principles.
Wonderful, wonderful. That video always brings me to a different understanding of things and brings me back to the center. Wonderful. Mike,
It's good.
yes, it is a very good video. So let me see, let's acknowledge people on YouTube. Mr. Galen, let's do that. We have let's see, Victoria Long Coleman, a regular. We have Mara Wilson, V. Lynn Whitfield, another regular, Diane Kingflowers, the savvy business consultant. She's in Charlotte, North Carolina, so amazing. Doretha, Denise, Doretha, Carla Hill, Shannon Chartland, Laura Jackson. Let me see who else here. Wyman Winbush, uh, Tobo Adin, and let me see. That's it. A great group we have today, Galen.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We got all kinds of amazing people. Definitely get your questions ready. And if you have not already, be sure you hit that thumbs up icon underneath the video so that we can alert the YouTube community that we've got some pretty spicy conversations happening over here on Think and Grow Rich Live. And then we got Ann coming back in as well. Hey, Mike. One of the things that we've mentioned a couple of times is, and I think Ann is the one that introduced this into this conversation, is that this is really about changing the level of vibration. And we've heard conversations around having low vibration conversations, having high vibration conversations. How has your business or your success changed as you started thinking about the vibration of your work, the vibration of your activities versus thinking of them as isolated tasks? How has this idea of vibrations changed your approach to what you do?
You know, again, another good question, because that's one of those things that I don't think for most people you think about. And for me, I think it's very easy for a lot of people. Probably not. If you're tuned into the show, you're already past this. Or if you're not, then you need to hear this. Um, so often we move through life by default. I said that earlier in my life. That's sort of a low vibration. You're keeping up with the Joneses. You're doing what you think is the right thing. And so you said it, Galen, you're approaching everything as sort of a task oriented, a got to, well, I got to do this. I got to get up in the morning and I got to go to work. So, cause I got to provide for my family and I gotta. And I think one of the shifts, and I wrote a blog on this, gosh, probably 15 years ago now, is when you start operating from a higher vibrational place. First, it starts with the people you surround yourself with, because sometimes you can't get there on your own. Like let's be honest. I mean, that's one of the cores that Ann and I've talked about. One of the cores you talk about on the show. Like, it's a mastermind. Sometimes you cannot make it on your own, and you have to understand and accept that. And so, for me, it started with surrounding myself with the right people. And the right people are not always the ones that are going to just stroke your ego and tell you you're doing a good job. They're going to tell you what you need to know, not just what you want to hear. They're like, hey, listen, you got to do this thing. And so for me, I can remember certain points in my life where I had somebody from the outside that could see more clearly, because I'm looking this direction and they're looking at me from a different perspective and saying, hey, no, you got to do this thing or you got to do that thing. And it was still a got to do because somebody else was asking it. I think one of the things that changes when you again, for me, surrounding yourself with the right people, you start following many of these principles, where you talk about the imagination, where you talk about the planning and executing, is things turn from a got to into a get to. And that is for me, that higher vibrational point. Like I get, I remember at one point back in 2012 when I was doing a podcast before it was called a podcast, it was an online radio show and you were trying to make something happen. And it became even then task oriented, that like, man, now I've got to do my podcast. Well, when you've got to do anything, you're not operating on a level of uh, energy and fire and passion. And that's one of the things I think that for me this chapter hits home in because you're moving that energy. I mean, it's in the description. And when we talk about being passionate about something, right? If you're passionate about anything, that's driven behind, it's always driven by some form of uh, we would just say energy, but I would say for the sake of the chapter, it is a sex energy. You're either wanting to impress somebody, you're wanting to impress upon someone, you're wanting to get to a space that when you get excited about talking about something, you have a lot of the same body cues that you have when you're trying to approach romantically a partner, right? You start, even now, like I start talking about podcasting, right? I start speaking quicker, I start breathing deeper, I'm excited about it. You see the energy change. Those are the same things that happen when you get into a romantic relationship with someone. So it's all about how do you channel it. And so when you're saying, hey, how do you operate on a higher vibrational level? I think for me, it's moving from the get to the got to, or the got to the get to, and surrounding yourself with the right people and thinking, you know, what is the end result? What's the win? What's the benefit? What's the goal? It's not just about what am I engaging in right now in the moment, because that becomes really mundane and boring and crummy. I hope that answers your question, Galen.
It does. I want to bring Ann back into this, but one of the things that always comes to mind when we talk about this principle
Hmm.
is the level of playfulness,
Hmm.
the level of lightness that comes in when we are either pursuing someone that we're trying to attract, or when we're, yeah, see charisma there in the chat that Toto Adine has brought in. There's a level of charisma that comes in when you're trying to leverage those same sex principles. And my wife teases me all the time. She says she can always tell when I got a look on my face, and my voice drops just a little bit. But there's a playfulness that is associated with this that generates a level of energy that I don't get when I'm really, really serious and when I'm grinding. And you talked about feminine energies versus masculine energies, Luis, but there's a playfulness that's associated with this. Why do
Hmm.
we tend to forget to play when it comes to trying to accomplish our business results or our life results? Why do we forget to play?
Are you asking me or Luis? Sorry,
Whoever. Yeah.
I'll jump in. Why do we forget to play? Because I mean, you said it earlier. We become absorbed in the task. When you become absorbed in the task, you lose all of the peripherals. You end up getting so focused in on the minutia that then it really is a task oriented thing. It's easy when you're focused on the minutia and the tasks to then fall into fear of, am I going to hit the timeline? Fear of, am I going to be able to get this done to the highest level of quality? Fear of, well, if I get this done, am I going to make enough financially? Is it going to satisfy the needs? At least, it's always going in my, I shouldn't say it's always, often it will be fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of something, because I'm so focused on this task in front of me that I can't see the whole rest of the world. And that goes back to one of my prior statements, is sometimes that's why you need someone to knock you upside the head, maybe not literally, and say, hey, what are what are you doing? Because they can see something different from their perspective than what you can.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Miss Ann?
If you, oh, I'm sorry. If you allow me, real quick, Galen, It is also, we don't forget that we are creatures of habits. We are programmed, right? And we do most of our mornings, our evenings, everything is we do the same thing day after day. We even feel we get mad, we get hungry, we get mad at people, we get happy with at a certain time of the day. So yeah, it's very easy to don't be to get caught on this programming that we have. My the thing that I want to say, we have to be very intentional about this kind of stuff, right? Intentional. Yes, that's all I wanted to add to it because I found that sometimes we forget that we are creatures of habit. Yes.
Yes, I have a book for that. Galen, yes, this
Yes.
was a setup for coming back. So I wrote this book. It's called A Daily Date with Myself. It's a daily journal. And I wrote it actually as a journal because of this particular principle, along with the other one, where we read about Dr. Elmer Gates talked about sitting for ideas. And in this journal, basically, I from the Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, listening this morning, she talks about morning pages, and I'm sharing this because I think we need prompts sometime to enable us to transfer that energy from one form to another. What do you do? What do you do? Napoleon Hill tells through one or more of the 10 stimuli, it has the effect of lifting one up like in an airplane, right? Above, I would call it, he calls it the horizon. I would call it above problems and challenges and struggles. And it permits you to, and I know I experience this when I'm traveling, especially in the air, and thoughts and things come. And I usually travel with a journal of some kind, but he says that the quality of these thoughts are not normally available, on a lower plane. And I think that this is what happens, and I am going to go there because I am happily married to my boyfriend, so I can say this. But I think that this also is what happens to many of us when you are finished having sex and you have these thoughts. It's like, oh, these thoughts, right? But what do you do with the thoughts? What do you do with them? And that's what I really want to bring back to this conversation as we talk about um, the transmutation of this energy. And Napoleon Hill goes on to say that when you're lifted to a higher level of thought through any form of mind stimulation, an individual occupies relatively the same position, if you will, when you're in that plane. But he also goes on to say uh, that these thoughts are creative in nature, but they are expanded. And then he says, the way has been cleared for the sixth sense to function. It becomes receptive to ideas which you could not reach. These ideas could not reach the individual in any other way. And so this is often known, if you will, as our conscious is operating through the faculty of the sixth sense. So I just wanted to come back in and share that, because a lot of times we don't know, what do you do next? And one of the things that I do, and I would encourage all of us to do, and it's in the book, and that is sit for ideas every single day. First thing in the morning, just sit with a journal or a pad or something you can handwrite with, not the computer, but in a creative way. First thing in the morning, after you do whatever your routine is, just sit quietly in a meditative state and just wait for the ideas. And I just want to share this because this is one of the ways that you can actually, doesn't cost you any money, to actually begin to practice transferring of that energy from one form to another. Now, what was your question again, Galen?
Hey,
No,
before
I
you
think
answer that, I'm gonna jump in here and just say I ordered Anne's book off of Amazon just now while she was displaying it. So I'll give her the plug. Go order it. Go order the journal. Go order the workbook. I'm serious.
Oh,
yeah,
thank you. Thank you.
I think you addressed kind of my question. You addressed kind of the need to really think about how we're thinking about this. We got another question from YouTube. Victoria Long Coleman is asking, How do you, Mike, how do you channel your energy to shape a culture of forward-thinking, human-centered leaders within an industry that's often focused on volume over value?
A lot of industries are focused on volume over value. And that's a good question, Victoria. Thank you for asking it. I would say, first and foremost, it's about developing culture from the inside. It's definitely about pouring into the people that are serving, you know, customer. I think that's for any industry. It's you have to pour into the people, which means as a leader, as many people that I'm sure listen to this show, you've got to make it a point to listen and ask better questions of your people so that they can, you know, you actually first you have to actually like people. Crazy, right? You have to enjoy the company of others. And then you've got to, make sure that you're asking good questions and truly listen. And said a minute ago, like when you're spending time with yourself, and I'm actually going through a course right now, a biblical course that talks about, writing things down, slowing down, praying, writing down your thoughts. And I think that you have to apply that same principle with people. You have to take the time, if you're going to ask a question, listen to the answer, take the time to write it down so it shows them that you actually care. And certainly, if we're talking automotive industry, volume matters, but it is never sustainable without value. And so there are so many ways to present value, certainly value in product, but then there's value in the people, there's value in the service, there's value in what information you're able to provide. So it's one of those things that you have to connect all of those dots to a larger mission. I think at the core of the show, and I got two more points, and then I know we're maybe coming to the tail end, but I think it's important to stay disciplined with the basics. And somebody said that earlier was you got to be intentional. I think it was Lewis that said you got to be intentional and you got to stay disciplined. And so it's really easy. For example, if I'm tired or I'm not feeling it today, to fall off and be a jerk or do whatever. And there's a ripple effect of that. There's also a ripple effect the other way. When we're talking about transmuting energy, there's a ripple effect for the positive, there's a ripple effect for the negative, and you have to keep that at your forefront and realize that's key. And then the last one where you're talking about, hey, how do you you know channel your energy? I think over time, as we learn about things like this, and because you don't know what you don't know, right? But once you know something, you can be more deliberate, you can be more intentional. And said a moment ago, like you have to be focused on transferring your energy versus spending it. For me, it's way more valuable to leave people more energized, more excited, more pumped up than where I found them. And the reality is, that's the same thing. If we're talking about the name of the chapter, when you're talking sexual energy, hopefully you're focused on the other person. So you're leaving them more excited, more pumped up, more, more energized, more jazzed than when you started. If you're not, you're doing it wrong. And so, and so that's one of those things where you channel is it's like, well, if I'm going to engage in this conversation, am I going to leave that person better than where I found them? Can I transfer that positivity? Can I transfer that energy? It's not just about spending it or even channeling it for me. It's about how am I transferring that weight or not weight? How am I transferring that light to somebody else and keeping them energized and equipped after the interaction?
All right. Well, that's a really good point to go to our annual meeting. And so Galen is going to share that the JPEG. I want to encourage all of you to think about this. Where do you go on an annual basis to bring your life in writing? Where do you go to be held accountable for those dreams and those goals that you've written down all year long, with or without accountability? As Mike has shared, that accountability, whether you call it a mastermind group, a buddy group, a prayer group, or whatever kind of group, without that accountability, the chances of your hitting that goal is probably slim to none. Where do you go? And that's really why we host this event every year. It's called an annual meeting for your life. It is the Think and Grow Rich International Mastermind 2026 annual meeting, and I call it for your life. It's an annual accountability meeting. And for those of you that's listening, we are hosting this meeting in January the 9th and 10th of 2026. We start on that Friday with a, a open mic, if you will, but then Saturday is where the work begins. And I say work because, and Mike talked about this, he talked about the inner work. It's the inner work that we do through these principles that help us to have a better quality of life in every area of our lives. Because in this place, in this space, we share in writing what we shared we were going to do in the beginning of the previous year in our spiritual, our family, our financial, our health, our education, our personal development, or your career, your business, your recreation or creativity, in your civic areas. Those are the 10 areas of our lives. And even if you just say, you know what, I can't do all of that. I'm just going to take in 2026, maybe 2 or 3 goals, maybe your health, maybe your wealth, maybe the spiritual. You may just stop there. But whatever it is, our challenge to you is join us in January 9th and 10th, 2026 at the Embassy Suites in Boca Raton, Florida, where we will come together again like we've done for almost 20 years now. And we bring our life in writing. So just imagine how far you would be in your financial area if you just invested $20 a month because of being a part of this group for 20 years. Just imagine where you would be if you invested just 1 hour a week in your life, not the life of your spouse or your children, all of that, but just in personal development. And so I just wanted to stay there for a moment because we're also hosting every week an opportunity for you to create a free family and friends mastermind group that ties into this. Now, you can go to the internationalmasterminders.com website and you can register. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can scan the QR code on the screen. Also, if Doretha or anybody else is listening to us live, if you can put the International Masterminders website in the chat on YouTube, because we want to make sure that if anybody's listening and you're interested, you can also, I'm going to put my name. If you have any questions about this event and you would like some answers to questions before you register, just put Ann McNeil in the chat. I'm just learning how to do that, right? Just put the word Ann McNeil in the chat, and whoever you are, I will commit to follow up with you, or someone from our team will follow up with you, because I just believe so strongly about this. And I know my time is well invested, that I want to stay here just a moment longer to really impress upon all of you. This is a family affair. You can see the children in the front. I have to talk about these children. 3 of the children sitting are in one family. If you see the children on the screen, for those of you that cannot see it, and you listen to the podcast, I just want to say they have been masterminding in a family mastermind called One For Me, and they're in the Bahamas. Now, 3 of these children set a goal because their grandfather was a golfer. And these 3 children have now, in the last 3 years, become professional golfers, because in their mastermind group, that as a family mastermind, they just started going to the course, and then they just started learning. And for the last 12 months or so, they have been involved nationally all over the US in golf tournaments for children their age. Now, I'm only sharing that as one family goal. One family goal. A few years ago, one of them had never seen snow before. So the family set a goal a few years ago to go to a place during the winter so that that child could experience snow. Now, I'm just staying here maybe just a little bit too long, because my commitment is every week I need at least one person to register for our annual accountability for your life, not my life. This is for your life. So Galen, thank you so very much for sharing, but I just had to just sit there for a moment so that people really understand the benefit and value of not just coming for yourself, but bring your family. All right, thank you. Okay,
Oh,
wait a minute. I'm hosting today. I thought Galen was. So Galen, I'm going to go ahead and prepare to wrap up and land this plane. No pun intended, from Napoleon Hill, talking about this is, being on that plane as a part of, transferring your energy. So as we wrap up, we do want to give a kudos to those of you that have joined us here live in the studio. And Galen, I'm not sure if you did that while I was out, but Angela Sturgis and H. Bonnie, thank you. And for all of you that's on YouTube joining us live, many of you, as you know, you're here every single week, and we could not really have a really the best show without you. So Wyman, Victoria, so many of you, Laura Jackson, Shannon, Carla, Doretha, yes, I'm going to get in trouble, Diane King, Flowers, Lynn Whitfield, Meta, so many of you, Victoria Long, so many of you that have joined us, and some of you that are new. We really want to give you kudos to M. Kirk. Yes, 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 yes. MK, M. Kirk, thank you so much for joining. We're going to wrap up by asking each of our co-hosts to give a takeaway from the podcast this morning, and then how can you be reached? Galen?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and start. So yeah, Galen Bingham, I'm the leadership strategist. This has been an incredible conversation, and it really does bring back to my mind how we take ourselves too seriously, too seriously, way too much. And it's when we recognize the same attributes, the same energies that we deploy when we're trying to attract someone sexually, that when we start leveraging that for our business, for our efforts, for our activities, that's when the real magic happens. So that's one of the things that I'm taking from this conversation. Again, my name is Galen Bingham. I'm the leadership strategist. You can find me on all platforms, and certainly go to my website. But the most fun way, and I'm going to say the most profitable way to get a hold of me, is to go to my podcast, Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership, which is available on all podcast platforms. We talk to leaders all over the world about the whiskeys they drink, the music they listen to, and what they think it really takes to be an effective leader. And if you go there right now, you'll see my conversation with the one and only V. Lynn Whitfield, who is here in YouTube world with us right now. But we are just having fun, and we're talking about what it takes to be a really effective leader. I double dog dare you to try us at least once. Guarantee you that we will take you at least one step closer to helping you find how to be effective as a leader.
All right. And that is, yes, the leadership executive coach. Thank you, Galen. All right, Luis Jimenez, how can people reach you?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for that pronunciation. That was very good. And thank you. Well, I loved it got to me again to do not forget to study this book. Do not put it down. Even if the foundation has some little books says 10 minutes daily with Napoleon Hill, or think you're gonna reach 10 minutes daily. Get a hold of those. I bought a bunch of those and I give them away all the time, because it is, if you don't have 10 minutes for you to study, then you don't have a life. That's for sure. So if to me is that study, understand that, and being intentional. This chat with Mike was very very depth. It was deep for me. Also brought me a little bit closer to what is written down here. A lot of these things are written down in the Bible as well. So and they complement lovely, lovely. So it gives you a different understanding. Not trying to get religious at all, but it gives you a better understanding of life. And yeah, thank you. You guys can find me in any platform as Luis Jimenez. My website is luisjimenezcoaching.com, and I do coaching both in Spanish and English. So I'm right here for you guys. Anything that you need, I can help you with anything. But most important, understand the principles of Napoleon Hill to have a fulfilled life. And that as well, Mike, fulfillment is not about the money, it's not about the sex, it's not about the emotions, it's not about the reward. It is about the fulfilling inside. That right? Getting fulfilled with purpose. That's my takeaway from today.
Thank you so
Back to
very
you,
much.
Ann.
Now, Mike. All right. Thank you so very much, Luis. And Mike, we will have you share your aha, and I'll close it out and let everybody know how they can reach you, but your ahas, if you have any from the show today.
Absolutely. I just love learning. And I was going to try and find it. There's a note in here that you reminded me of in the book, page 71. I'm going to try and turn to it quickly. It says, and this wasn't like a specific theme for today, but it says the fact you're reading is an indication you are earnestly seeking knowledge, and it's an indication you're a student of the subject. And for us to be a student, you have to have humility. And I think it's one of those, for me, there's a few things. One, it's just a reminder that we can learn something everywhere, even if it's something that we think we already know. It's always worth having someone pour into us and remind us of something we forgot. Because again, this started for me, and shout out to you, Ann. Prior to me being on this show, you and I connecting and you saying, "Hey, you need to go back and read this," and it's like, man, you do. It's so easy to fall away from that stuff. So that, not specifically from this show, but leading to this show. So thank you for that. I would say, during the show, I agree with Gail. Like, it's with Galen, it's so important to have fun. It's so important to frame things as the get to versus the got to, and you move them from being individual tasks to what's the greater purpose. I mean, that was a really good point and reminder to me, just leading with his question earlier today. And as far as contacting me, you can go to I have a couple of websites. I have leadtheteam.net, or my main site here I think they have on the screen is MikePhillipsSpeaks.com. It's where I post a weekly blog. I do a recap of my show. I host a show called the Leadership Toolkit, and I interview awesome leaders from all over the globe. That was how Ann and I accidentally met. That was one of those divine appointments, we'll call it, and how part of how I ended up here this morning. So any of those ways, I would love for anyone here to tune into the Leadership Toolkit. I interview people and we just talk about what are their successes, sometimes what are their failures, so that you can avoid those during your own journey. And then I recap that, like I said, in a blog and several small posts throughout the week. So, and people can email me. I'm easily emailable, if that's a word. Mike@leadtheteam.net. So thank you, Ann. And thank you, Galen. Thank you, Louis. Thank you, everybody, for having me on the show. It was a really great conversation. I enjoyed it a lot.
Great conversation it was. Great conversation it was. And thank you so very much. And I have been taking notes. I'll give just a couple of my takeaways. And one of the things you said was mindset over matter. I host a what's called a Black NSA $1 Million Mastermind. I know Wyman is on here with us today. And one of the things I share with everybody, I've been doing it now for 10 years, twice a year, as a volunteer and a board member for NSA, National Speakers Association. And I say, what we do here when we walk through the book Think and Grow Rich, one chapter, one principle per week, is focused more on mindset, not skill set. And when you said mindset over matter, and I think sometimes we get so focused on our skills and the matter and all of those things that are surrounding us in our face that we don't quite see that if we take the mindset, like Napoleon Hill talked about that airplane, when you're on it, in it rather, and you're so far above the matter of it all. You just reminded me of that. And then you started off by talking about the power of reimagining, and that took me to the creativity principle as a part of this principle and how it connects with sex transmutation and how you can transfer the energy from one form creatively to another, but I continue really have to have some kind of exercise. And then you said, how do you channel the energy, the win, the result, the goal, the purpose? And then when you shared the got to versus the get to, you got to versus you get to, the mindset shift that acquires takes takes energy. And then ask, then listen. And I'm guilty, okay, pray for me. How, when you ask a question, be willing to listen. Be willing. And when we do these podcasts, this is a really good example of when we ask questions of individuals, especially when they're guests, we have to slow down, take a breath, and let them share. So those were my thoughts from the podcast and my takeaways and my ahas. And want to really, really, really thank you so very much, Mike Phillips, for sharing. Everybody, please connect with him, listen to his podcast, connect with him on his YouTube channel and his LinkedIn, and everywhere he has shared an opportunity to connect with him. If you want to connect with me, you can text the number 59925 and put the word "and" in the chat. And what I'm also learning too is if you have any questions, just put my name in the chat, Ann McNeil on YouTube, and we will follow up with you to answer those questions. But you got to give me a way to reach you too. So, all right. But anyway, everybody, we want to thank you, all of you that's listening in live with us in the Zoom, but also those of you that's listening on the YouTube. Thank you so very much. And we're going to wrap up the show like we usually do by encouraging all of you to continue to think and grow richer. And thank you, Mike, for ordering the book. And I will bring it up because one of the ways you can transfer your energy from one form to another is to get my book, A Daily Date with Yourself. And you can get that on my website, annmcneil.com, or you can get it from Amazon. Anybody, everybody, remember, continue to think and grow richer, and we will see you next time. Thank you.